Welcome to The Daily. I'm Niall Paterson, and I'm pleased to say it's that time of year again. You know the one, when photographers are actually invited into schools to take pictures of pretty teenage girls, and when rich middle-aged white men take to Twitter to say their two Ds and a U never stop them from ruling the world. Yep, you've got it. It's A-level results day. Well, sort of. We are recording this on Wednesday. Results are out Thursday. But just how many tears will have flowed by Friday? Because this year's cohort has been described as the unluckiest in years. COVID hit them hard, missed exams and class time. We're now in a cost of living crisis, and the cost of higher education keeps rising. Universities themselves are struggling with their funding, and there's more competition for places. Plus, it's not easy being a teenager. In a while, I'll be looking more closely at the university sector and hearing from the professor who's labelled this academic year as the unluckiest. But you know what? We should probably start with someone who's got their eye on Freshers' Week. Grace Brookes is 18. She's from Doncaster. She's hoping to attend Durham University to study politics and sociology. And if she does, will be the first in her family to go and complete a university degree. Grace, it's lovely to have you on the podcast. I suppose we should point out to our listeners, we are recording this on Wednesday lunchtime. A-level results are not yet out. In fact, I've got the football on. England are currently 2-1 up against Australia. That may very well change. So when people are listening to this, A-level results may actually be out. But ahead of those results, oh dear goodness, tell me, how are you feeling?
Doing my exams and waiting so long, it just feels so long-winded that it's been a long time coming. So I'm extremely nervous. I really hope I get in.
We will later be returning to Grace. But what about university being that ultimate goal? Should it be? And just how many of this unlucky set of students will actually get to go where they want to? That's what we'll be examining next. OK, well, let's speak then to Professor Elliot Major, Professor of Social Mobility at the University of Exeter. Professor, great to have you on the podcast. But for my benefit and for the benefit of our listeners, just briefly explain exactly what is a Professor of Social Mobility.
I am the country's first Professor of Social Mobility, and my work is really dedicated to trying to improve the prospects of children and young people from more disadvantaged backgrounds. So I do lots of research on that issue, trying to influence governments to try and improve the prospects. But a lot of it is around practical projects, things like extra tutoring.
Why is it that we are now describing this current cohort of A-level students as the unluckiest?
They've kind of faced a sort of perfect storm in many ways. So, of course, they suffered like many young people during the pandemic. They didn't go to school for a long time during that time. They wouldn't have done their GCSEs or equivalents at age 16. So this is the first time they've taken major, examinations. Many of them will have suffered learning loss during that time. Of course, we've also had this cost of living crisis, which has affected a lot of children and young people across the country. But also importantly, this cohort is the first in which we're coming back down to the tougher grade boundaries, if you like, the pre-pandemic grade. So there'll be fewer A's and A stars than previously. And on top of all this, we have demographic booms and troughs over the years, and we're currently in a boom. That means there's more 18-year-olds. But there aren't more places, there aren't more university places. And universities, particularly at the moment, are having to think about international students as well as home students because of the sort of funding requirements to balance the books, if you like. So it just means it's going to be very competitive this year. So for a whole host of reasons, this is a tough admissions round for this generation.
Let's try and pick apart the factors that you were mentioning there. And we'll start with COVID. And look, I'm a father myself, but my boy is 7 years old. So the problems that we had were more to do with socialisation rather than studying to get into university. But I suppose that no matter the age that you are at, there will be plenty of kids who have struggled, not just academically, but with their mental health as a result of COVID.
Absolutely. A lot of my studies look at the learning loss that have been suffered by those people, actually not just low income, but middle income backgrounds as well. So those children have suffered academically, but also that there's been a real issue, a sort of tsunami almost of mental health issues. And that's as important, by the way, as the academic issues. And many young people have missed out on that socialization. So, for example, one of the things that we're finding this year is that a lot of young people, including my daughter actually, are deferring entry into university. And I think one of the reasons we're seeing a lot of young people do that is they just want a break and maybe, actually live a little before going to do that degree course. This isn't going to be a one-off. We're talking, of course, about this cohort now, but this is something we're going to be looking at for the next 5-10 years, I'm afraid.
When you say that it's not just the richest, it's also the middle classes that are being affected by it, that suggests to me that the overwhelming majority of students are going to have been negatively impacted by what is going on. And if we take the normalisation of A-level results, I mean, that could have a really detrimental effect on huge numbers of kids. Just explain exactly how that process, the Minister Nick Gibb has been talking about, to add weight and credibility to qualifications, how that is going to affect people.
In the last couple of years, for various reasons, we have been allocating a higher proportion of A grades, of B grades at the top of the grades distribution. But at some point, the government was faced with this dilemma of when do you bring it back down to the grade distributions that we were experiencing before the pandemic, okay? And so last year, it was a sort of halfway house in terms of bringing back down these grade boundaries. This year, it will be broadly the same as the pre-pandemic years. So that just means that a lot of young people are less likely to get those A's and B's that they need for those, very highly selective sort of degree places. The other issue I think we're faced this year is that your children get predicted a grade, okay, by their teachers. And then on results day, we find out whether they actually achieved those predicted grades. If you don't, then it actually opens you up a whole new pathway, which we call clearing, which is basically what are the alternative options. I have advocated for what we call a post-qualifications admission system, which basically means you apply with your grades, right? But we're not in that place at the moment. The problem for this year's cohort is that teachers didn't have proper GCSE results to base those predictions on. So many experts in the sector are worried that those predictions might not be as robust. There's always uncertainty in those predictions, but there could be more this year than previous years. What I try to do, and in my own little way, trying to advise and help some young people, is not to rush into those decisions as well. Because remember, certainly in England, you're paying a lot of money for these degrees now, fees of £9,000 above, living costs. These are life-defining decisions. And I do think that we force young people in the current system to make decisions very quickly. And if you don't have all the advice for how to navigate the university system, I think it's very difficult. Doing a degree still enables you to get a good job, right? All the statistics hold up on that. They're still mostly a very good option for your future. So for me, whoever wins the next general election, this has got to be something they look at, because universities, and I would say this, are one of our best assets in this country, hugely successful across the globe. We need to fund them properly. So I think we're going to have some review on how we fund universities at some point.
But what then of the students who are sitting their A-levels who are not heading to university, who have made that decision? Now, you'd hope that universities would understand that the changes that have been taking place with the results this year, are employers aware of it?
No, I don't think so. University isn't for everyone. And I think I often meet young people who are very influenced by their peers, right? So if everyone is going to university, they are inclined to do so as well. We do need a better system of apprenticeship options in this country. You see it in countries like Germany, and often actually in places like Exeter now, we have what we call apprenticeship degrees, where you come into the university, but you're also working at the same time. And that's a real national weakness for us. And it means actually that for many young people, there aren't as many options there as there could be. But still, I would urge young people to have a look actually at those other options, because there you can get really good apprenticeship options where the company will be paying those fees as well. So you're earning while you're learning is the sort of phrase. So I think we could do more on that.
We are, in essence, talking about profound inequality, educational inequality, expanding into more general inequality. How long do you think we could be in this mess?
I think this is a generational challenge. Sadly, you're going to probably have me on next year, I suspect. We call this generational scarring. It's an awful term, I know, but unless we really work hard for this generation to improve their prospects, I think we will see social mobility go backwards. The higher the social mobility in society, the more likely someone from any background could make it in life. I think we're going to have fewer people from low and middle income backgrounds able to fulfill their talents for this generation, unless we do something about it. Perhaps another time we can talk about that, what we should do about it, because I think other countries are probably doing it better than us at the moment. But certainly this is a generational problem.
Absolutely. From all of us here on The Daily, send our very best wishes and best of luck to your daughter. I know how bad it was having two parents as teachers. To have a professor of social mobility as your pops, I mean, that must be even worse for us. So no, wishing her all the best. And Lee, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
So let's turn our attention to the university sector. And one university that I've got a bit of a connection with, in fact. Chris Husbands is vice-chancellor of Sheffield Hallam University, the place that was responsible for my postgraduate journalism training. So I'm afraid, Chris, the responsibility for me rests on your shoulders, and I will be posting your phone number so our listeners can get in touch with their complaints. Look, I suppose the place to start with us, Chris, is, I mean, should university still be the preferred option for so many young people?
I was doing some work in Australia a couple of weeks ago, where the government is undertaking a big reform process in higher education. And one of the things they said is over the next 15 years in Australia, 9 out of 10 new jobs are going to require graduate level skills. Well, this country is not wildly different from Australia. A degree doesn't guarantee success, but the evidence that we've got from this country and around the world is that it gives you the best chance of setting yourself up for future success. You should always make decisions based on what's right for you. You should look at your options. You should stand back. You should think about your strengths, think about what the future is likely to hold for you. But we know around the world that a degree is a pretty good choice.
Then the question is, are there going to be the places for these young people to get a university degree? Plenty of young people, as we've already been discussing, won't be getting the results that they had perhaps hoped for or even expected.
Over the next 8 years, there's going to be about a 16% increase in the number of 18-year-olds. So this is going to happen throughout this decade ahead. So the good news for young people is that there is no cap on university places. We've decided that we will take into account the fact that young people doing A-levels and BTECs this year are young people whose education was very severely disrupted in the pandemic. We anticipate that there will be a grade deflation, and we will take that into account as we assess applications as they come to us.
To what extent is there competition from those overseas students, which, as everyone knows by now, pay more, which the universities are crying out for right now?
We are not reducing the number of places available to UK students. We have seen a growth in demand from international students, and we're geared up to meet that. There is no reason why any university should, on the basis of numbers, be excluding domestic students to accommodate international students. Fees are not regulated for international students, but I've always taken the view, and actually most of the vice-chancellors that I know, I think, would share this view, that generally speaking in this country, universities are the university of, that's their name and that's their title. We're universities of place, and it is really important that we deliver our mission to provide and open up opportunities for young people from this country.
But is the funding structure for universities, is that broken at the moment? There are those within the university sector who say that fee cap of £9,250, that is no longer sustainable, that there needs to be more money found somehow, either by increasing the cap or by some other means. What's your view?
That £9,250 is worth about 2/3 of what it was worth in 2012. And you don't need to be a sophisticated economist. You don't need an economics degree to work out that money is getting incredibly tight. Growth of international students makes some of that. But crudely, we are going to need a sustainable funding base for universities going forward. Now, I'm pretty sensible about this. Is increasing the fee from 9,250 itself a sensible political solution? Well, it's not. It's tin-eared in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Even if this is not a debt like a credit card debt, the politics of this are that it is highly unlikely that any government, Conservative, Labour, whatever, is going to increase the fee in the foreseeable future. So the further consequence of that is that the government and the sector are going to have to work out what is a sustainable basis for giving this country the university system that its young people, its economy, its society need over the next 15, 20 years. We're not there yet. Those of us in universities, we're managing the funding system that we have. We're doing our best with it. But what we've got is not a sustainable basis.
I mean, if you had just some general advice for people opening that envelope or that email and worrying about what comes next, what would you say to them?
Some young people are going to get the results that they expected. Some are going to do better and some aren't going to do quite as well. That happens every year. I'm a parent, seen all four of those profiles amongst my children. You always have choices and you should take advice. You should talk to the people in your school or college. You should phone up universities, not in a sort of spirit of supplication, but in a spirit of inquiry. The best way to navigate any life transition is to think about your choices and to make sure that you are making decisions based on the evidence available to you, based on the choices in front of you. Take advice, think hard, and don't be bounced. Don't be hurried.
Okay, time to head back to Grace, who is planning a Freshers' Week in Durham, fingers crossed, all being well. She has done her A-levels, but didn't get to sit her GCSEs because of COVID. It's not been an easy couple of years for her. And of course, in previous years, there has been what's sort of described as grade inflation. This year, things are supposed to be returning to normal, which may very well mean that lots of people don't quite get the grades that they want or expect.
That's what's worrying me. I could potentially not get into Durham because they aren't giving any special consideration like they did last year. Being in lockdown, trying to revise for my GCSEs, it was really difficult. We hadn't seen people for 2 years and then we're all trying to make new friends in 2022, starting year 12. And I have seen people have really bad mental health issues because of being at home all the time, especially when you're a teenager and you're going through puberty and all your hormones are changing.
Does the financial side of things, does that not perhaps concern you a little bit?
The financial side is one of my biggest worries, especially with the cost of living crisis. When I applied to university, the cost of accommodation was different to what it is now. They've put the prices up so much, not just at Durham, but at every single university. So when I was applying, it wasn't that high. And inflation was totally different a year ago to what it is now. So accommodation has accounted for that. And things like the cost of food, I didn't know the cost of food was going to be this high a year ago. So now I'm going into university in September with the worry of, am I going to have enough to really survive? My parents, they're worried as well because we just don't know how much it's going to cost because it could go up more and more.
But those cost concerns haven't been enough to dissuade you from going to university. I mean, for you and your friends, university is still worth it.
It definitely is for the experience. I went on a platform called Zero Gravity and they have been a massive help. So they have something called the Zero Gravity Fund, which I've applied to. It's basically a scholarship. I think it's £3,000 altogether they give to people who get awarded the scholarship. That'll really help me and my family.
What is it then about university that still proves to be such a draw? What is it that you gain from that others who don't go down that path don't have?
I have a passion for politics and sociology. I honestly love it so much, and I see it as the best way for me to learn about that subject and immerse myself in the modules. I feel like university for me will fulfill that need of me being able to write essays and things like that and learn about politics and sociology a lot more. I think the experience of university as well, meeting new people, moving away, I think it'll help me, grow up a bit. instead of relying on my mum all the time.
I mean, what is it you ultimately want to end up doing?
I really want to go in the civil service. There's a graduate scheme called the Civil Service Fast Stream, and I think I'd want to do that after university. I think there's one called Development and Being a Diplomat, or maybe working in the House of Commons, but not as a politician, like helping politicians.
You were very quick. Yeah, you were very quick to say they're not as a politician.
I don't think I'd want to be a politician.
Best of luck to Grace and indeed to everyone who's receiving their A-level results. On the next edition of The Daily, we'll look a quick glance at the screen. Oh, goodness. 3-1. Apparently, I'm going to have to do something about England and a World Cup final. We'll see you next time.